The sensation was like a powerful gust of fresh mountain air, clearing away the fog that had wrapped him in a suffocating embrace for so long that he no longer noticed it until it was gone. "My brother," he whispered. "My friend." This book did what I believe it set out to do, what all good novels set out to do. It made me feel something extraordinary and deep. Reading this novel was a deeply unpleasant experience for me. I slogged through it for reasons that were half from the novel and half from my inner turmoil. I won't go much into the latter except to say perfectionism sucks and the burnout that happens from it is swift and unforgiving. This will be my last book review for at least a month, but I will be putting out some short story reviews if I can find enough to say about them, as I really love the format of the short story, especially for science fiction. Even as I throw the word burnout around, it feels more like this was a hill I needed to climb so that I could see the sunrise. It sucked in a lot of ways, but this entire endeavor makes me want to read more, experience more, even outside of the Heresy series. I hope you all follow me as I continue down the Warhammer book path and as I branch out to reviewing other things too. I would like to get better at reviewing things. I think every time I write a review, I'm like, is this good? Is this any better than the last one? I really hope it is. I hope I'm improving. I hope I'm getting better. I don't know, you just do the thing until one day you look back and you go, wow, that is better. I don't know. On that note, I have some game reviews coming out and that have come out, and I'd really appreciate it if you gave them a look. If you enjoyed the depth and voice I use to explore the heresy, you might enjoy the way I look at video games and other pieces of media. I am also currently playing through Cyberpunk 2077 on stream, a blind first playthrough, and I'm having a blast. We already got to have some stupidly pretentious yap sessions about the philosophy of consciousness, so it's going really well. I want to get some feelings about Graham McNeill out of the way before we get too far into this review, so please bear with me as I vent once again about him. I'll just say, I'm really glad that Graham McNeill included an afterword in this book. It was nice to be pulled out of my little angry hole where I hate on Graham McNeill for fun and profit. He seems like a cool guy with cool ideas sometimes. He just keeps falling short of the mark for me. I understand he has probably gotten better, but all I have to go off of are these two books, and reading two not so great books by the same guy leaves you feeling some type of way. The weird thing is, I see all of the potential in his books, and as much as I really did not like Fulgrim, I still am hoping that I read something by McNeill that finally clicks for me. This one really did not, and that bums me out. I know that other people have enjoyed his works, and people say that the stuff that he's written after this is better. Some people say the stuff he wrote before this is better. So I'm guessing it's conditions, the GW, all kinds of stuff that makes it just not good, but the reality is I didn't like it. But also, Graham, my buddy, my guy, my man, my dude, why did you write the women like that? I feel as though I cannot adequately express the ick that Graham McNeill gives me when he writes women. I have tried writing out what it is exactly, and there's a little devil on my shoulder that says, do you really want to argue about this with men on the internet? And the answer is no. I'll just say, this is something visceral that I, as a woman, feel when reading McNeill's women. I can give you reasons, like the fact they're both intricately tied to sex and their plot positioning in a way that isn't necessary, but I also want to be clear on this. I'm not labeling McNeill as sexist or misogynistic or anything. He just gives me the ick with how he writes in relation to gender. There's one scene, and this took me out of reading the book for a minute, I'm gonna be so for real with you, where Ostian is trying to comfort Serena and also chastise her for self-harm, and McNeill writes, his heart went out to her, though the wiring of his male brain could not understand the strangeness of her affliction. Like, I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Is he saying she's on her period or something? That she's suffering from the affliction known as hysteria? You know, the thing that they used as a catch-all and sexist way of dismissing real problems within women? I'm sorry? Do you understand why this makes me balk? The male wiring of his brain? Yeah, it's been shown that men and women have different brain wirings, but that does not mean we feel different emotions, just that we prioritize things differently in relation to survival. This is such a weird take that I legitimately feel blindsided by it. I'm baffled. It's so dumb, it's hard for me to even wrap my brain around how to start talking about it. This single line dehumanizes both Ostian and Serena in this scene. It makes men out to be these creatures too dumb and base in their instincts to understand the strange, ethereal ruminations of women, and it makes women out to be waifs of shifting tempers that cannot be understood by men, instead only passingly placated and hopefully weathered. Man, this took me out, and I still feel a visceral ick about it, if you can't tell. It was maddening to come across, and it soured a lot of my view of the rest of McNeill's writing. It really heightened my understanding of how he writes the Primarchs, though, and also why it feels like he puts masculinity, especially of the toxic type, above all else. And in this book, when he's writing these men, it kinda works, but I mean, the ick is something you should feel about them. Just please don't make me read any more women written by McNeill until he starts treating them as fully fleshed out human beings. Also, in before someone says, well, that's Ostian's feelings, it's not actually. There are a million ways McNeill could have communicated that as Ostian's feelings, but he did not. He communicated them as the narrator and author, and therefore leads me to believe that he, in fact, believes that Ostian is incapable as a man of understanding how Serena feels. It's baffling, it's weird, it's strange, it's gross. There's also a bird outside that's making a lot of noise, and that's adding to my frustration, but I am also legitimately frustrated about this. Oh my gosh, it's weird. It's so weird. Somebody also said that McNeill, in books before this, have written strong and good female characters, and so I would love to know why he chose to write the women in this book this way. It doesn't make sense to me. He acknowledges in the afterword that he knew this was going to be a long book, and he, as it was with some of the other authors, failed to put the spotlight in the places I wanted sometimes. There are parts he really nails, and he comments on this in the afterword, such as the death of Ferrus Manus and the story between Ostian and Serena, which I enjoyed despite the qualms I had. I'll talk about both of these scenes later, but the one that he failed to linger on, and the one that is the actual literal cornerstone of this book, is when Fulgrim takes the sword. It's such a short scene, and it deserved way more attention. That leads me to my last big issue with this book, and I think it's going to be an issue I probably run into again and again in this series, and is a huge reason I've chosen Eisenhorn specifically for my next book. That's the lack of a POV character. It would have been so good to have Fulgrim have an equerry that we followed throughout this book, or even following Solomon, who showed great promise as an Emperor's Children Loken/Garo type. Hell, I'd have taken Julius. I just needed someone to anchor myself to, and I don't know why McNeill chose to not have a POV character. I think arguments can be made about certain characters being POV characters throughout the book, yes. There are times we quote-unquote zoom in on certain people, but they are not the protagonist of this book. Not even Fulgrim, the titular character, is our POV character. And that's good, in my opinion. I honestly wish we had seen way less of Fulgrim, given the current flow of things, but we'll get more into that as we move on. Okay. Section of the review where I hate on Graham McNeill for fun and profit is done. We can get into the review proper. I actually debated putting my criticism of McNeill at the end in the hopes that the people who reach that point would be more open to talking critically, but I feel it's important to get that off my chest so you know I have problems with this book in the hopes that it gives my praise of certain parts even more weight. I don't think McNeill is a bad writer, or that this book is bad. You can have critiques of things and still think they're okay. I also don't think you're bad, or you have bad taste if you like this book. We all feel different things from art, and that's what makes it so cool. If you loved this book overall, I'm so happy for you. I wish I did. As it stands, I enjoyed bits and pieces, but it, like Lucius's ego, is an inflated mess with too much in it, and it suffers a lot because of that. This book has one giant, extremely obvious big idea. Pride comes before the fall. Since that's a phrase, I think it counts as a theme. I'm still working on learning things like that, so bear with me here. It is, at the very least, a pervasive idea that is in conversation with almost every character's arc in this book. For most characters, it's steering the conversation. For others, it's merely flirting with them. Solomon, for example, dodges the folly of pride as far as I can remember. And you'll hear me say that more than once, that phrase, as far as I can remember, because I read this book in less than a week, but I cannot tell you how much my brain hurts from trying to remember everything crammed into this narrative. Yeah, it's an Emperor's Children book, right? It's gonna touch on pride at least a little, if not center it. But I do think we can't take it for granted. McNeill almost painstakingly injects it into everything, from the Remembrancers to the Imperial Guard to the Astartes, and it's something we will want to keep an eye on as we move from character to character. I decided to go back to my old format of rattling off the characters and what I think, largely because the overarching narrative here is reminiscent of False Gods, the first of McNeill's books, far too large and far too complex for the space it occupied, and I don't want to do a story recap again just to hammer that point home, like I did with False Gods. So let's explore these characters, starting with the Remembrancers. Now, due to the fact that the women in this book are Remembrancers, and I don't like how McNeill writes women, you might think that I dislike their characters, but that isn't the case. If you just ignore the parts of them that make me feel icky, which are the parts that are not very important anyway, you get 2 solid Remembrancers that I enjoyed. Bequa's obsession with her aging self and whether or not she's still fuckable is boring to me, and it's one of the parts I am electing mostly to ignore. Her pride about her art is what is important to this story, and I really wish that McNeill had made it so Ostian had unknowingly or accidentally hurt Bequa's pride concerning her music, even as he loved it so much. I think it could have made for an interesting scene if he had praised her music, but not praised it enough, and that hurt her pride, leading to her barring him from the planet. And if you say, oh, well, that's an absurd thing for her to be mad about, yeah. This woman is a grade A narcissist, especially about her music, and I wish that had been centered more. She believes she is literally the Emperor's gift to mankind when it comes to her music, so that tracks. She is also self-described as a libertine, and it sets us up for an interesting sense of tension, knowing that Slaanesh is the ideal libertine, one who has no understanding or care whatsoever for human social conventions. The fact that Bequa took Ostian's rejection says she is merely selfish, not a libertine. By the end, as she embraces Slaanesh, if she'd been given the chance, Bequa would have torn Ostian in 2 without a care for the social convention of asking before taking. I think that might be irony? Unsure. I'll take a slight detour here to mention Blake, the author that Tobias, the archivist, introduces Julius to, and whose writings eventually circulate among the crew. I'm always fascinated by the made-up authors in these books, and McNeill really spends some time on Blake. I wanted to peg Blake as a sort of Marquis de Sade stand-in, but I think that McNeill does a strong enough job of differentiating Blake from de Sade, even though Slaanesh is very much an embodiment of de Sade's work when it's taken at face value. It's hard not to think of de Sade, a man who is heavily labeled both by himself and others as a libertine, and as the man after which sadism is named when thinking of Slaanesh. Also, Tobias is just Kirill Sinderman again. I know they don't have the same profession, but kind old man who knows a lot recommending book to an Astartes? Man, they have one of those on every single ship these days. And here's the thing, I'm not mad about it. I think it's a good role to have on the ship and shows that many of the Astartes care about learning and they know who to lean on when they have questions like that. It's nice to have a human that they can kind of bounce off of in those moments. I was a little caught off guard by Tobias' death in the Maraviglia only because he seemed primed himself to fall to Slaanesh, and there's no real reason given as to why he doesn't. It feels strange and off-putting, as if McNeill went, oh, gotta make an impact here, and just had them kill Tobias as he's leaving in disgust. Why was he disgusted? Why did he not fall to chaos when most of the other Remembrancers/mortals, even those who did not visit the temple, did? Is he not the one who understood Blake the most? I think arguments could be made for why he didn't, and I know that not all of the mortals did. There were many others shaking their head in disgust, but McNeill chose not to make those arguments in a book where he shows little want or care for the use of subtext and subtlety in many places, which leads me to have little want or care to justify this within the text through twists and turns of logic. It was a weird choice, considering how little he said about Tobias' ideas in the book. Maybe something got cut out, but the section felt weird. I didn't really need Tobias to live, even if I liked him. In fact, I think it could be cool that he dies here, but there isn't enough setup for it to feel gratifying. You don't get to see him get left behind the way that Ostian does. Speaking of Ostian, I really enjoyed him. I think other than the section where his dumb male brain can't understand a woman's complicated, intense feelings, he's a good character. He's multifaceted, complex, and juggling a very real obsession with his art. It's cool to see that his isolation saves him, so to speak, from the Slaanesh corruption. I think that in the initial stage, both Nurgle's influence and Slaanesh's influence work like a virus, spreading through contact with the temple, and then through those who are most susceptible, starting with the humans via art. The fact that there is such an emphasis on art in this book really sings to me, and shows me that while I think McNeill falls short in understanding Slaanesh, he at least knows that beauty is as much a part of the Dark Prince as pain and brutality. Ostian's scene with Fulgrim, where the Remembrancer is telling this godlike being that his art falls short because it's missing a part of him, is one of the most telling and incredibly staged scenes I have read yet in this series. I want you to know that I'm blatantly and openly praising McNeill for how masterfully he wrote this scene. The premise is peak to begin with, and McNeill delivers on the rest of it so well. The confusion and pain in Ossian as he attempts to describe what makes art is powerful, and you can feel Fulgrim seething between each word that the Remembrancer utters because Fulgrim cannot understand what it means to be that vulnerable. Everything in this book goes back to daddy issues, if I'm being honest. Also, I did not like Your Lie in April for a lot of reasons, but if you have seen it, you'll understand what I say when I call Fulgrim the pianist and Ossian the violinist. The scene exposes something that I really like and wish McNeill had touched on, that perfection, like heresy, is context dependent. Like, what is perfection? What does it mean? I found this incredible Reddit post written by a user who, through sheer force of will, managed to not understand a single word in this book, and in one of the replies, speaking on the Maraviglia, the original poster says, "You'd think that if a bunch of Slaanesh demons showed up to a concert, they'd probably try to elevate the performance to a supernatural level of quality. Instead, they raised the volume up to the point it hurts your ears, causing pain instead of ecstasy, and then murdered the audience?" What is perfection, then? Is it the best of something? The exact definition is being complete of its kind and without defect or blemish. And damn, if that's not context dependent outside of most sciences, I don't know what is. Art lies at the center of perfection in our definition of it. I'm not going to define art here, that's as fruitless a task as I've ever seen. But I do want to say art is very subjective, and perfection in art is also very subjective. If you consider something like sadism or masochism to be an art, which some people, including Slaanesh, do, then perfection has a lot of wiggle room. For Slaanesh, the way I see it at least, perfection is found through excess in all things, even to the point of death, for death holds no sway over those who seek excess. Is Slaanesh about sex? Yes, but not just sex. Slaanesh worshippers want to be filled, yes, but with all things. And as someone with ADHD, I get this. I love overstimulation, although it has to be up to a certain point and within certain contexts. I also do believe that if anyone in the Black Library has done psychedelics, they should be punted up to the front of the line to write Slaanesh. I'm not kidding. I want shorter books written by authors who have done more mushrooms. Please, Games Workshop, I am begging you, let them do ayahuasca before they write Slaanesh. Please. There is a feeling I can't describe, one of being wrapped up in a blanket of stimulation, of sound and touch and smell and sight and feeling, and you are writhing. I know this feeling, it is something visceral. It's probably connected to psychedelics, but I've obviously never done those, so who knows. I've talked about this before, but I think the word writhe works so well for Slaanesh. When you are overwhelmed, you writhe on the ground like the wretch you are. And this brings me to, actually a section where I kind of hate on Graham McNeill again. Oh no. So sorry, I just kind of forgot to talk about this, but I do need to. Graham McNeill writes Slaanesh worshippers as if they are disgusting. And I know, some of you may think they are, but Dionysus has been my favorite Greek god since forever, and I think seeking pleasure can be cool, actually. But McNeill, whether he's conscious of it or not, approached writing Slaanesh worshippers with a puritanical eye, and it's hard to pinpoint where exactly he does this in this book, but if you've read it recently or are down to reread it, which I don't recommend, I think you'll understand what I mean. This is not a book that wants you to sympathize with Slaanesh worshippers, or, God forbid, empathize with them. They are an other in this book, which is weird, because this book is about them. If you watched my last review, I said that it was strange that I couldn't identify how Black Library authors felt about the Imperium. Well, I'll tell you, I understand how McNeill feels about Slaanesh worshippers. They are hedonists, derogatory. They are prideful, selfish, and always in the pursuit of pleasure, derogatory. They are creatures that deserve nothing more than to writhe beneath the gaze of God. The Emperor. Like the wretched creatures they are. The only problem? That doesn't work in this book because there's no point of view character to feel that way. It's just McNeill feeling that way. I think it's mostly in the descriptions of internal feelings of characters like Julius and Fulgrim where I really get this vibe. And also the descriptions of the art. It's like McNeill has to describe it, yeah, but he's doing so with a look of disgust on his face as he writes. He does not truly understand the joy that Julius feels. He does not understand why grief feels overwhelming and why it isn't good or bad, it's just excessive. And that's gonna bring me to the Astartes. But actually, not quite yet. I completely forgot to talk about Ossian's death. I just want to say the scene is really cool. His and Serena's love story, despite the fact I wasn't that fond of their scene together, is beautifully tragic in kind of a Greek tragedy way. There's a sort of almost Romeo and Juliet feeling to it in its tragicness. I liked the end that they both got. I thought it was good. I wasn't mad about it at all. I was kind of sad for Serena, but also I think, as I've said before, death is still the best ending you can have in this series, especially as a mortal. So anyway, now we'll actually talk about the Astartes. I had that great like segue going, and then I forgot to talk about Ossian, and that's what having ADHD is. Anyway, the Astartes. Every time I say Astartes, I'm brought back to my Horus Rising review where I say I don't know how to pronounce it and then boldly declare I will probably never say it again. Life is really funny sometimes, because now I prefer it over Space Marines. It feels more regal? I don't know. There are 3 new Astartes who stand out in this book, although I will be honest, I have a note on about page 200. I read this on my phone, so that's about a fourth of the way through, where I went, these guys are really hard to tell apart, but they're starting to shine. They were basically the same guy until we get further into the book, when in fact they split into 2 guys, with Julius and Marius being in essence the same guy. If they pop up again, I hope they will have found their own identities. Solomon knew he was just a simple warrior, but as he looked into the eye of the world, he dearly wished there was some way for mankind to avoid such wanton destruction of the landscape. I think Solomon is a good character, although he is a breed of Astartes we have seen before. As I said earlier, he's essentially the Loken/Garo of this book, and I think he's a good one. He has a good head on his shoulders, and he generally has interesting thoughts and a good amount of sass. I do think his death was really goofy, because the idea of like 30 Astartes getting slaughtered by 2 Astartes and not a single one of the 30 thought to say, Lucius, Solomon, why are you doing this? Is mildly infuriating. Also, I guess every single one of them had their helmet on. Like, it's just is kind of a goofy scene. For some reason in my head there were 30 of them, there might have been less, but the fact that no one thought to be like, Solomon, Demeter, what are you doing? Captain, what's going on? I don't know. It's just like, it's such a goofy ass scene, dude. It's so silly. I don't know. It's also mildly infuriating, but at this point I've learned to just throw my hands up and go, yet another tragedy set up just to be tragic. I'm beginning to doubt that Games Workshop will ever realize that tragedy actually can get old if it's doled out without being earned, but I don't have much more to say about Solomon except I like this guy. Another, please. Astartes like Solomon are, to me, the backbone of this series so far, and I really do hope they just keep making more like him. I really could read about 100 more Lokens if it means getting to hear their weird little man-turned-war machine thoughts. My favorite quote concerning him was this, as he is contemplating alien superstition. Solomon was beyond such superstitions, but he smiled as he realized that his obsessive habit of modifying his battle gear and entreating it to keep him safe before going into battle might be considered superstitious. No, he decided, honoring your battle gear was just sensible, not superstitious. Also, that's some voodoo shit and I don't fuck with it. And that fun callback will now allow me to discuss what I think the Emperor's Children did correctly. Their warrior lodge was not secret. Maybe I really bought into Loken's propaganda, but I do believe that the secrecy is what made those lodges bad. Men sitting around and yapping about how they feel and like what they think, that's pretty sick. That's pretty nice. It does suck that the ECs are so hierarchical that they can't achieve an open space like the Luna Wolves, but it tracks for their legion. The scene where Lord Commander Fail challenges Fulgrim on his plan, something I found to be both bold and stupid, and which was met with a lot of ire, was interesting because it shows that Fulgrim was able to hold meetings of all sorts where people beneath got to share their ideas, even if they risked his wrath in doing so. They at least had the space to do that. Horus did something similar, and I guess it just goes to show that they did not live their lives in isolation while making plans to destroy entire empires. I don't know, I just thought it was a cool scene. And that was a war council, not a lodge, but it was close enough that I thought I could bring it up right now. We also get to see Tarvitz and Lucius appear in one of the lodge scenes, and I love that Tarvitz, I named him Tarvitz. We also get to see Tarvitz and Lucius appear in one of the lodge scenes, and I love that Tarvitz is immediately pegged as a line officer, which I believe he later agrees with, if I'm remembering correctly. I at least know that he would agree with that sentiment on a certain level. Tarvitz is a philosopher king in many ways, a man who ruled or really commanded out of duty and without a love for power. He was a good man, and I'm glad I got to see some of his classic wit alongside Solomon. Lucius was somewhat absent in this book, even if he was there. I think the most important scene we got with him was the one where he gains his ritual from Serena, the one of cutting his face so he will not forget his enemies. I'm wrestling with how I feel about Serena, who harms herself as a release from the inner pain she feels to make that pain real, teaching him to do it as a sort of marking himself as a memory. I think it's a strange line to walk, having someone who self-harms, when self-harm scars are usually a point of shame, teaching Lucius to do it and then having Lucius wear it as a symbol of almost pride. I could be misinterpreting that though, given that I only know his later lore in bits and pieces. As it stands, it feels like he is not taking it on as a point of shame, but as a way of remembering those who have wronged him. So perhaps not a point of pride, but also not a point of shame. As someone who has experience with self-harm, I do understand the general shame that you feel in having self-harm scars, and it's more that I wish there was more concrete symbolism there or an idea being fully crafted. There is too little intentionality in it. Right now, to me, it feels like, oh, Serena cuts herself, so she can be the one to pass that ritual on to Lucius. I wanted there to be some sort of reclamation for Serena, or acknowledgement of its roots for Lucius. In a book where most of the time you're hit over the head with a character's thoughts and feelings, I felt it was really lacking in this scene, to say nothing of what transpires before Lucius is given this ritual. I think that Lucius does have his moments where he shines, but I think he's honestly better written in Galaxy in Flames. The scenes where he is dancing to the music in battle are so beautifully written, and they have an understanding of the intoxicating nature of Slaanesh's call rather than the infectious nature of Slaanesh's call as McNeill envisions it. I hate to say it, but Ben Counter got Slaanesh a lot more than McNeill did, and that is surprising to me personally. I don't know. I have a sneaking suspicion that Lucius will get a lot more spotlight in later books, and honestly, it's so funny. When he does stuff that's really bad, I tend to just roll my eyes, but when Erebus does stuff that's really bad, I want to throw the book against the wall. I think they're both well-crafted characters, but Erebus really gets my goat and Lucius doesn't, and I haven't quite pinpointed why that is. I think maybe because deep down I view Lucius as pitiful, as like deserving of my pity in some way, because I can't even, like, I just look at him and I'm like, what a sad man. He's just such a sad man. Whereas like Erebus is just like a shitty person. I don't know why I think they're different, but I do. I don't know. I just want to track that feeling as we move forward, so I'm noting it down here. I'll take this moment to detour and say that Fulgrim's first impression of Erebus is also so funny. McNeill writes, Fulgrim glanced over at the seated figure of Erebus and felt an irrational dislike for the word-bearer, despite never having met him or heard a single word pass his lips. I just love this moment as it feels so correct. Like, literally everyone knows that Erebus has bad vibes. I really hope we get a scene where Lorgar also admits he hates Erebus. Incredible, 10 out of 10, no notes, McNeill. Let's move to Marius, who, for all intents purposes, is just Julius but with a different name. I won't talk much about him except to say, this man was very forgettable, and when he turned to chaos, I just kind of shrugged and went, okay, sure, yeah, I don't really know what he was going to do, so like, whatever, dude, I don't really care, yeah, cool, okay, yeah, whatever. He didn't get a lot of concrete character growth in this book, or if he did, it was so easily forgotten in the great bulk of the book that I don't remember it all. I don't know, I'm sorry. Julius, on the other hand, is really interesting. I know I somewhat sneered at the idea of him being the POV character, or said it more flippantly, but I think this would have been a very interesting book if it had been from his point of view, or if it had followed him more closely. He is the clearest picture of the Astartes' descent into chaos that we have seen yet, with his base feelings and pride being played with by the miasma of Slaanesh, and the ideas of Blake helping pave the way for his corruption. It does take the Maraviglia for Julius to fall fully, but his descent is well choreographed, and I just wanted, in true Slaaneshi fashion, more. If there was anyone's thoughts I wanted more of, it was Julius's. I also feel like, and this is probably a product of GW not having its lore ideas together, but Julius is written as if he is warp sensitive, kind of like force sensitive. I have a personal headcanon that some Astartes basically have cracks in their psychic armor to begin with, like Lucius with his narcissism, hence why he can hear Slaanesh's music in Galaxy in Flames, and with Julius here because of his inner hunger for power through excess. He is a prime candidate for Slaanesh, and I believe that the Dark Prince's agents begin picking at his armor even in the Laren Temple in a way they didn't with others because he had those cracks. This theory could be dog shit, or it could be canon that's revealed later. I don't know yet, but I do like that this book has me thinking about that sort of stuff, even if it's just a slip up from McNeill and GW because they still didn't have anything hammered down by this point. I gathered some scenes with Julius, and I just want to walk through them quickly and talk a little bit about some of the things we learned from him. The first being when Fulgrim enters the war chamber at the very beginning, I believe, and McNeill writes, "The eagle was the Emperor's own symbol, and he had commanded that Fulgrim's legion alone bear it upon their armor as a mark of the regard in which they held. The honor done to the Emperor's children was immeasurable. As he saw the gate, Julius felt fierce pride swell within his breast, and he reached up to touch the carved eagle on his breast." This paragraph, along with, I don't know, the entire series of events that have happened within this story already, have led me to believe that the Emperor is in fact emotionally a potato. That man does not understand how human emotions work, and despite the fact he has elevated the Primarchs above human, they still retain their human emotions. I'm genuinely shocked he didn't try to work those out of the Primarchs, given that they are made in his image, and he is, as I said, a literal emotional potato. He continues to, at every turn, set these men up for failure as their maker and father, and it just makes me want to throw my hands up and go, what are we even doing here? And when I do, I'm reminded that these guys are basically Greek gods, and those guys also have a lot of daddy issues. It's no wonder that the Primarchs too, for the most part, do not set their legions up for success, relying too much on loyalty or hierarchy to carry them from battle to battle. Everyone in the story seems to forget that everyone else also has emotions. It feels like the lie they tell Astartes, you don't feel fear. Everyone is telling themselves that they don't feel anything at all, and it's all a lot of emotional repression. Except for the Emperor's children. They seem to be the ones, so far, that embrace ideas and feelings past brotherhood and loyalty, and yes, it led to the sort of fall they had, but it's at least a more emotionally stable core than most of the legions I've seen so far, namely the Luna Wolves. Julius tells his equerry, Lycaon, the pursuit of perfection extends beyond the martial disciplines, Lycaon. It encompasses fine arts, literary works, and music. Only recently I was privileged to hear Bekwa Kinska's recital, and my heart soared to hear such sweet music. To me, this quote encompasses what a lot of people miss about both the Emperor's Children and Slaanesh. Yes, the murder fucking is a lot to handle and it definitely catches your attention, but there's a lot more to perfection and excess. And while this book definitely skirts around it, the tone of this book, for the most part, isn't aligned with what Julius says here. It's like the clouds broke for a moment and I felt the sun on me. I was like, yes, McNeill gets it! And I think this is encompassed in Julius experiencing Lycaon's death, in which McNeill writes, as he looked into Lycaon's dead eyes, he felt loss and guilt churning within him as he realized as much as he would miss his friend, he reveled in the sensations his death had stirred within him. Like, yes, McNeill, my man, yes, revel is such a good word here. But I do believe that McNeill is using it as a positive word here to mean that Julius enjoyed his grief, which isn't exactly true. I believe that Julius enjoyed the way that the grief filled him, not that the emotion was grief. It feels like McNeill is going, look at these guys, they're happy they're grieving. Isn't that awful? And like, no, it doesn't matter that it's grief. I think that this all could be mostly solved if McNeill had at some point acknowledged that the moral tilt of an emotion or action did not matter to the Emperor's children, even if it matters to McNeill and colors the way he writes it. I think though, to give him some credit, it can be hard to write, they liked everything, while showing they still liked obviously pleasurable things. I do think there's a way to say they participated in a giant orgy without it sounding like it's a priest talking about the heathens down the road, but I don't know. The more I try to say what it is about McNeill's tone, the more it escapes me, and I feel like I just wanted him to revel in it more himself, but he couldn't, and I have to accept that. Like, McNeill, it's not disgusting that she used her own blood to paint the painting. It's only disgusting to you. You're the only person who thinks it's disgusting in this whole book. I guess Solomon probably would have found it disgusting. Julius was cool. I'm unsure how he's still alive by the end of the book, given the fact he doesn't really have a face anymore, but the whole taking other people's flesh and putting it on your armor thing is pretty neat in a grisly, grim, dark way, even if they did knowingly steal the idea from the Necrons. And now, you nerds, it's time. We're going to talk about Fabius Bile, the man, the myth, the legend. And I didn't really understand why people liked him so much until I realized he's one of the guys in this series who is in it just for the love of the game. Kind of like Lucius, but way more likable. The part where Fulgrim says, Yeah, do what you must, my man. Has a note on it from me that says, I am so freaking excited, dude. And I can't tell you why, but Fabius Bile just makes me excited. He's a weird little guy doing his weird little guy thing, and he loves it, and I love it, and we all love it. He has nerves of steel to boot, with the scene between him and Fulgrim showing his true, intense love of the game and his dedication to it. He has a shot, and he sunk it, dude. Absolutely nailed it. And when Eidolon, oh, dumb, awful, Eidolon is on the table, and he's found out that Fabius is going to give him a xeno organ, and he's real mad about it, so he's going to kill Fabius. Bile bites back, saying, no, Eidolon, said Fabius, you won't kill me, for I deliver on my promise to you. You will be more deadly than ever before. You should also remember that a warrior's life is a dangerous life, and that you will be under my knife many more times before this crusade reaches its climax. So do you really want to threaten me? Oh. The note I have next to this is, dang, Fabius does not mind taking risks to get shit done. Love a crazy dude. And truly, I do. And it feels like a lot of people also really like him. I think he embodies the Emperor's Children's true ideal of seeking perfection because he actually is taking risks to find perfection. And he is not above admitting that perfection is a ways away, unlike many of the EC members, who seem to think they're always within reach of perfection. Fabius Bile wants to achieve perfection, and he is not afraid of the road that it will take to get there. And for that, I admire him. I also think it's so funny that so many people understand Fabius Bile's love of the game, but don't understand Slaanesh. Fabius Bile is such a good example of Slaanesh. He is excessive about his want to change. He is so in your face about it. Just think of Fabius Bile when you want to understand Slaanesh. There's no sex to be had with Fabius Bile. I don't think Fabius Bile fucks, but like, you know, it's about the excess. It's about the love of the game. Energy is an eternal delight, whispered Fulgrim, and he who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. You could have stood at my right hand, Vespasian, but you have shown that you are a pestilence within the ranks of the Emperor's children. You must be cut out. Vespasian is one of the truly tragic characters within the story, and while he does not get a lot of airtime in the book, what he does get is just enough to make his death meaningful. We get to see him talk to Solomon on a very deep level, with their exchange of, what do you plan to do? Solomon chuckled and said, stand firm and act with honor in all things. That isn't much of a plan. It's all I have, said Solomon. Shows me he is one of my little guys, my good guys amongst bad men. He is the foil to Eidolon, who embodies the Emperor's children post-fall, whereas Vespasian embodies them pre-fall. As an Emperor's Children player, I do not shy away from their 40k ideas and who they have become. They fell to chaos, that can't be changed. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in their 40k models and lore, but there will always be a part of me that loves the 30k Emperor's Children a little bit more. There's a feeling of hope in 30k that is obviously absent from 40k, and that little bit of hope, even if it is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, makes me feel so much more attached to them just on a visceral level. Vespasian is the sort of Emperor's Children I want to think of when I play them. Even as I move their chaos-riddled bodies across the battlefield, he is a man who sought perfection, same as the 40k ECs, but he did it with a sort of honor and an understanding that perfection is found through admitting your faults. A small aside before we move to our last section. The Eldar. It was really cool getting to see aliens! I love aliens! Frick yeah! Aliens! Aliens are so cool! I love alien worlds! Aliens are the best! Tell me about your stupid alien lore! I love learning about aliens! Yeah! Woo! Yeah! There's one of the reasons that Mass Effect is one of my favorite series of all times. I just love learning about, little alien facts. Like that your aliens do little things. I don't know. I just love aliens. They're really cool. I also really like the Eldar in general, so I'm pretty biased, but this was really neat. I love the Farseer and getting to see how he viewed humanity. I love that they called them monkeys. I did find the battle scene between the Eldar and the Emperor's Children to use a word I use a lot, very goofy, largely because McNeill chose to only bring named Emperor's children down to the surface, meaning no one could die during that battle, and it ends up making the Eldar seem really weak in comparison to the Astartes, which, as far as I understand, they aren't. I mean, one of the Astartes talks about how fearsome the warriors are and how they'd faced them before, and he'd lost many battle brothers, etc., etc. This could have been fixed so easily by having like a backup squad of unnamed dudes in the Firehawk. Like, I don't know. I will say that Fulgrim losing his bodyguards was obviously a big deal, but that showed only the strength of the Wraith Lord, not the strength of the Eldar warriors. I think I just needed to see like one squad of Astartes, like 5 dudes die from the fighting, and it would have felt a little less goofy. It felt extra goofy like in the middle of the battle when I realized that everyone was a named character, so they weren't gonna die. So, I don't know, it was just a strange scene overall, even though I really liked getting to see the Eldar. I could legitimately read a whole book that is just someone telling me about the Eldar race. And, oh, I forgot to write this into the script. I love learning about aliens, and one of my favorite short stories from kind of the golden age of sci-fi is by H.B. Piper, and you can actually get it on LibriVox, which is like a free app that lets you listen to audiobooks that are read by volunteers. And it's called Omnilingual, and it's about this group of, like, xenoarchaeologists, I believe they're called, or something, like alien studiers, studiers of ancient aliens, and they are going to find the, like, Rosetta Stone of this alien race that was on Mars. Anyway, it's a really good book, and it's largely just a bunch of, like, people talking about alien lore, and it's really good. But keep in mind, it is like a golden age sci-fi story, so it's like older, but also in the book there's a really well-written female character who gets like bullied for some of it, and then she finally like makes the people who bullied her, specifically like one guy, get his comeuppance. I don't know. It's a well-written story. You should read Omnilingual by H.B. Piper. I like H.B. Piper quite a lot. Right. Back to the script. I did love that it was in this book, though. Even if I think so much of this book should have been trimmed down, the scene is really interesting. I believe that this is also one of the first times, although not the first time, I think during Horus's electric Kool-Aid acid demon trip, that we learned that the Primarchs were created using warp magic. From the Farseer, he says, "I do not know for sure, but I believe that whatever dark forces his Emperor employed in the creation of these Primarchs renders many of them as little more than specters in the warp. I cannot read this one, nor sense anything of his future." I've learned to be cautious of any lore in these books, because if I say anything I learned in a book, I am almost immediately met with an actually, but I'm going to just lay myself bare for the actually firing squad and say, wow, this lore is cool and interesting, and I'm excited to learn more about it eventually. I like this setting. Now, onto the little babies who make it tick. There are a lot of Primarchs who are shown in this book. I think there's like a total of 9 or something, but only 2 of them really matter, and that's Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim, and I'll talk about them in that order. I really liked Ferrus Manus, and I hate that he ended up as just a plot device in Fulgrim's story. I think that it would have been way better if Fulgrim thought he had killed Manus, and yet Manus pops back up and goes, haha, you have not yet defeated me. But I understand they really wanted this battle to have weight, even if it was, given its length, essentially a footnote in this book. Ferrus Manus is, in this book, really great. I like him a lot. He has some great scenes with Santor, his equerry, and we get to see his bond with Fulgrim in both past and present. There are a lot of what I would call fun moments with him, and usually when he was on screen, so to speak, I was giggling and kicking my feet, because it was going to be mostly a fun time, at least until he, died. I love the scene between him and Santor when they're talking about Balhan's fate after his mishap with the Diasporax, which, by the way, I didn't even talk about in this review because this book is so long and it has so much in it. Anyway, they shouldn't have killed those nice people. I personally love any dynamic where it's an advisor speaking to a more powerful person, usually a king, and they're playing this fun little game of rhetorical power and positioning to try to win over the king to do what they want without outright saying, most of the time, what they want the king to do and why they want the king to do it. I love it. That scenario would make a great TTRPG or LARP if it hasn't been made already. I think that Ferrus is a great candidate for this too, because he is the type of man to be swayed by advice from someone he respects. Someone like Fulgrim would not be so easily swayed, so it's more fun that it's Ferrus. I also really enjoyed the scene where Ferrus baits Julius into being prideful and then practically winks at him with a jolly old smile. Like, God, Manus was cool. I wish he'd been given more airtime. I also really enjoyed the story of him and Fulgrim and how they each forged a weapon. And at the end of the contest, Fulgrim had declared the golden sword the equal of that borne by the legendary Nuada Silverhand, while Ferrus Manus had sworn that only the mighty thunder of gods of Nordic legend were fit to bear such a magnificent warhammer. Like, that's just plain cute. I don't know what else to think about it. It's cute. I also enjoyed the story about Manus being called the Gorgon, or when McNeill describes the banners and what they depict, showing that each of these Primarchs carry a rich history with them, like knights or kings of old. It's a series of neat little touches that make the Primarchs feel large and real, as if they have this huge history that spans behind them that is fleshed out in the annals of history somewhere, even if I know that at the moment of this book being written, that isn't necessarily true for all of them. It helps to set that up. Ferrus's death took up the space it needed to and accomplished what it needed to for Fulgrim, even if it ended up not accomplishing much for Ferrus except to cement that he too suffered from the folly of pride. Which leads us to our final section. I saved Fulgrim until the end, even though this book is named after him for a number of reasons, but namely because you need to understand everyone else in this book to understand why Fulgrim falls short for me here. And also, I find his story to be lackluster and disappointing, but I do think that's entirely because of how I interpreted it, not on its own merit, and hopefully that'll make sense by the end of this section. Like Horus in the beginning of his arc, chaos kind of happens to Fulgrim. He does not choose it. Does he go and pick up the sword that obviously screams trouble? Yes, but there is so little in that scene concerning his internality that I have no idea why he did it other than there is great power here or whatever. I hadn't pegged Fulgrim as someone who was obsessed with power. Specifically, to me, that's different than perfection, so that reasoning feels shallow. As far as I can tell, he just picks it up, and I do not know why. It's such an obviously stupid thing to do, and also, up until this point, Fulgrim has hated alien stuff, so who knows? He needed to pick up the sword for plot reasons, so he picked up the sword. If it was Slaanesh's influence that made him pick it up, that only further proves my point that Fulgrim is not really culpable for a lot of his actions in this book. As soon as he picks up the sword, he enters into a sort of fugue state for most of the novel, and we see him have lucid moments during this, but those only cement that for most of it, he's not really in control. Am I absolving him of his sins? Only partially, really. And it's so hard to tell how much of his decision-making is actually his, since the voice he's talking to not only seems to have verbal influence over him, but psychic influence too. It's just a little disappointing to me. I wish that the influence had been more externalized, and yes, there are scenes where it's frightening and interesting, but I don't know. I didn't like it. I want to give you some great big analysis about this, but it boils down to I didn't like it. I wasn't captured by it. I wasn't captivated by it. I didn't find it all that interesting. I didn't think that it had that much of an impact. Like, I wanted something else. And I don't know for sure what else, but this wasn't it for me. It felt hollow, unearned, out of Fulgrim's hands. Yes, one could argue that he was lucid during a lot of the book and was acting on his own impulse, but the Fulgrim we meet before the temple is so vastly different than the Fulgrim we get after the temple that it's hard for me to figure out if he's not lucid or if Slaanesh was just able to get to him that quickly, and if so, I don't really know why. I wanted Fulgrim to have a hand in his own corruption, and it makes me sad that he didn't. Fulgrim is extremely insecure, from what I understand. Having his legion start from where it did, spurred on by his father's praise, which he gave out so freely, and the honor that he bestowed upon the legion by naming them the Emperor's children, all of that meant that Fulgrim was perfectly poised to be a perfectionist with a giant streak of self-hatred. Anything short of perfection meant that he not only failed himself, but he failed his father, his legion's namesake, his Astartes. He had so much pressure on him that he was bound to crack eventually, and Slaanesh cracked him really easily, in my opinion. I think there are moments where we see him fight, but similar to Horus, there are a lot of points where Fulgrim's quote-unquote evil switch just gets flipped, and the book just didn't do a good enough job of telling me why and how all that works. Maybe it was to keep some mystery and magic? I don't know, dude. I don't know. I'm trying to get all my thoughts together and write this section, but it's exhausting to me because Fulgrim does so much in this book and it's so inconsistent. 1 minute he's lucid, 1 minute he's not, and I can't figure out what choices he's actually making and what choices he isn't making. And that would be super sick if this book was actually about him, but it's kind of not about him. It's just kind of all to lead up to the Dropsite Massacre and him getting possessed by a Keeper of Secrets or something, and then suddenly he's trapped in his mind palace, and this book is a mess, dude. It's a mess. I'm really glad if you liked this book. I didn't get it. I feel like I didn't get it. Maybe they wanted it to be out of his hands, but like that just, I don't like stories where things just happen to people. I like people to be like active in their own demise. I think it gives it so much more weight and it makes it so much more interesting. And like, I was just sad that it wasn't this way because like, it felt like it was the same way with Horus, and I just wanted... And McNeill also wrote that book! God, guys, I'm tired. I'm tired of freaking Graham McNeill. I'm so sorry, Graham McNeill. I'm sure you're a better writer by now, and I'm sure there were a lot of reasons that your books are the way that they are, but this book was not good, dude. This book was... It was like a 5 out of 10. When I say not good, I mean it was just not good. It was an okay book. There were points of it that made it redeemable. And you might be like, wow, May, it feels like you're overreacting quite a lot. But I mean, I feel like coming into the Horus Heresy series as somebody with no experience in this game put me in a really weird position. And I totally understand that. I'm taking responsibility for that. I'm complaining about it still. Where like, I don't have a lot of the like lore from having played the game for 10 years before reading this series. But also, it makes me wonder, like, did GW want these books to ever stand on their own? What was, like, are these only for people who are already in the hobby? If this was to sell more models, why not make them appeal to a wider audience? If you're gonna steal everything from Dune, at least market to a Dune audience, which is most people who are nerds, who may not currently play Dune. I don't know. Oh my god. There's a lot, there's like 50 million more things I could talk about with this book. I literally wrote, what is this, like 22 pages? This review is going to be probably slightly under an hour long. It's so much. And I feel like I learned a few lore things, but I didn't have a good experience reading this book. And like I said at the beginning, half of that was probably on me, but half of that is definitely the book itself. I don't know why these books keep... Like, it's just the McNeill books. The other ones have been fine. I don't know why he gets underneath my skin specifically. Hi, Editing May here. I just wanted to say I didn't transition very well to the end of this review. I didn't transition very well in many parts of this review. I apologize for that. That's something to work on for next time. And also, I'm currently showing you on screen the model finished. I'm really proud of this model, and I didn't talk about it in this review because this review isn't really about the model painting, but I liked painting this model even if there were times where you can literally see me strangle the model, just because there was so much filigree, I guess is the word for it. I had a great time painting it, even though it was kind of frustrating. I'm excited to paint more. I love it. It's so good. Anyway, this is the end of the review. I'm gonna say some things before I go. Thank you so much for watching. Yep, bye. Thank you for joining me in this book review and general yelling session. You can find me yelling about Warhammer and playing video games over on twitch.tv/GrimlinMay every Wednesday through Sunday at 12 p.m. CST. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me why I'm wrong about everything I said. Have a great day, and I hope to see you goobers soon. Bye! Dude, I painted that. Wait a second. I painted this. Holy crap, what the heck? I painted this. I did this. Wow, I feel like I just came out of a dissociative state. Dude, that looks crazy good. I'm not even kidding, what the heck? Oh my god, look at him! Oh, I think I was so stressed about getting it done that I just didn't even like sit and think about how much I like how he looks. Look at how cute he is. Oh, look at him! Oh, just rending his legion in two beneath his feet. Oh, wow. what a man. What a man, what a man. What a very stupid man.